Hi everyone, and welcome to the first video discussion on The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I have recently finished the game and would like to now start bouncing some ideas off of the audience. Breath of the Wild has been a fairly divisive game, I have found, amongst players. A lot of people who really don't like it, a lot of people who really like it. So what I'm looking for today is to get just a little bit better perspective on the views of people who either really like the things that I don't like in the game, and then those who really don't like the things that I enjoyed a lot in the game. For this reason, we're going to have to break this up into separate videos, kind of the way I have been doing for my video discussions in the past. And for the first video, we're going to be focusing primarily on the open world structure of the game, as well as gameplay, combat, and that sort of thing. So there's one thing I want to address first before we get into anything. I know there are a lot of people who really feel like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild did not deserve the scores, the high praise that it got from critical reviewers. You know, the 97 out of 100 that it has on Metacritic. And I want to say first that I'm not really interested in having a discussion on what score the game deserves. I believe that it is not my place to tell a reviewer of the game that they were bought off, that they're being dishonest about their opinion, that they're not taking into account certain issues that bothered them in other games. That's not really at all what I care about. I believe that whatever review score it got is the way that those reviewers felt about the game. There are so many different factors that go into how much a particular person enjoys something that you just can't account for, especially in a conversation where you're trying to just simply write off a person's opinion with generalizations. There's just way too much to analyze, way too many factors that go into whether or not a person's able to overlook certain things because they loved this part of it so much that account for whether or not they feel it deserves a perfect score or not. I personally do not feel that Breath of the Wild deserves a perfect score, and there are many reasons for that I will go over the course of this discussion video series. But let's just not have that discussion because I really feel like there's nothing useful we can gain from doing that. We can't know why the reviewers gave the score they gave. We have no proof of whether or not they were being dishonest, of whether or not they were paid off to do so. We have nothing that we can say definitively for sure why they gave the score they gave. And ultimately it doesn't matter. What matters is how I felt about it, how you felt about it, and I am open to hearing your perspectives and willing to change my mind on certain things if you bring arguments to the table that I find convincing. So let's go ahead and let's engage in that kind of a discussion, that kind of dialogue. I think the first thing that I want to address is the fact that I hear a lot of people talking about how if this game didn't have Zelda in the title, if it wasn't a Legend of Zelda game, people wouldn't be enjoying it as much. And there are a couple of different angles that people come at for this. A lot of people are just saying brand loyalty is a factor. That may very well be true. If you're a big fan of the series, you're a fan of like their approach to aesthetics and design and atmosphere, a lot of that could definitely play a role in your enjoyment of this kind of open world game, whereas maybe a similar kind of open world game, let's say like Skyrim or Xenoblade Chronicles, because you don't have that emotional attachment to the sort of quirkiness, the visual and audio design style of a Zelda game, if that's not your thing, maybe you would have the same sort of criticisms for this kind of open world as you do for others. Whereas because you're a Zelda fan, because you love all those aspects I've been talking about, you're able to sort of overlook what's going on here in the design of its open world. I'm not going to entirely dismiss that argument. I think that that may be very true for certain individuals, but I do want to make it clear that that is not the case for me personally. Yes, it is true that I have enjoyed most of the 3D Zelda games a lot. That's not to say that I feel like it's a perfect series. There are definitely some problems I had with like Twilight Princess, for instance, and even a little bit with Skyward Sword as well. So I'm definitely not coming from a place where I feel like the Zelda series is perfect or even like the best game series out there. I think it is one of the best, but I'm not going to say definitively I think it is the best. So I have tried to approach my analysis of the open world here with as much objectivity as I can. And some people are going to say, well, you're never going to be able to separate your own, you know, bias, so to speak, for your appreciation of older Zelda games from this. And I'm not able to prove or disprove that to you whatsoever. All I can tell you is that I'm not the kind of person who is looking for Zelda tropes to reappear in every Zelda game, or that it excites me to see this new twist on Kakariko Village or the Master Sword or whatever. I'm actually more of the mind that I would like to see them go in more unique directions, which is why lately I've been more impressed with games like Link's Awakening, Minish Cap, and especially with Majora's Mask, which is my favorite of the series. The ones that do different things with the story in the world from the sort of like traditional Zelda Triforce, Ganon, Link and Zelda story that they have done and iterated on many, many times. In any case, that's kind of a little bit of a ramble, but I'm just trying to open you up to the idea that I have done all that I can to set aside any bias that I have and to approach this objectively. So when we're talking about the open world, this is me not trying to defend Zelda because I love the Zelda franchise, but because I legitimately believe that this open world is a lot of fun to explore. There are a lot of people who seem to think that the world is extremely empty, that you can just go for long stretches running in a single direction and nothing interesting happens. And I just want to pull up an example from my own gameplay where I just feel like that isn't true. That there are interesting things to do all over the place. But whether or not those things are interesting to the individual player, of course, will vary based on subjectivity, based on whether or not you're into open world games to begin with, based on what kind of interactions you find interesting at all. And I think that the open world style of gameplay that's become very popular in recent years is one that is very prone to becoming repetitive, where you're doing sort of the same things over and over and over again. I think Assassin's Creed, while pioneering in a lot of ways a lot of these aspects of an open world that we've come to see borrowed in a lot of other properties, that it was itself very prone to being repetitive in nature. You kind of just do the same things across each game over and over and over again. And so, when I do a platinum trophy run of Assassin's Creed 2 and Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, and then I come into Assassin's Creed Revelation or Black Flag or Assassin's Creed 3, and I'm like, I feel like I've done this like completionist run a bunch of times already. I can totally understand the fatigue there and the repetition. But with Breath of the Wild, I actually never really felt that way, to be honest. And so I'd like to pull up a video here to sort of demonstrate a little bit. So this is like an hour and a half clip that we did. I believe I was in the village here for a while. Oh, one thing I should mention, I think, before I go any further with this, is that there are going to be spoilers in this video. Maybe I'll put a warning earlier on with a title or something like that, but just want to make sure I verbally say this video series is going to contain spoilers. So if you don't want any spoilers for Breath of the Wild, you're not going to want to watch this. But let me see if I can. So I did a shrine here. I came out of the shrine and I decided I was going to sort of start exploring the world. So we're here at around the 16-minute mark. And there's an hour and 22 minutes total in the video. And in that time, let's see, I wanted to see a little bit about how the hunting and the cooking works. So I decided to shoot one of these gulls here and went and collected some meat. So, that was an interaction I had not done in the game up to that point before. I was like, I'm going to try this cooking thing out. Let me gather some ingredients for that. So that was something that I did. So I had just come from Kakariko Village. By the way, here's an enemy that spotted me there. I saw one of the horse stables over there. And so I was trying to decide, should I go over there and do that first? And then some other enemies sort of like popped out of the ground here. I decided to start using my new boomerang, which I did not catch. I was trying to get used to the timing on that. Then I found the boomerang over there, went and grabbed it. Then this guy came, this Bokoblin came chasing me down on a horse. Shot him, and I believe I took his horse, if I remember correctly. In any case, I had a battle there. This is only, what, a couple minutes, 3-4 minutes tops after when I was starting here, talking about how many meaningful things there are to do. I decided I was going to try and approach this horse and capture it, and then take it over to the stable and put it up there so I'd be able to come back to it. So, you know, found another battle on a bridge shortly after that. A guy was getting attacked. This Bokoblin here was attacking a guy, so I rode up on him. Took him out. And, you know, then talked to the guy. A couple minutes later, I was riding towards Hyrule Castle, and this is where I decided, hey, I'm gonna... Because we hadn't approached it yet. And, you know, we had heard stories about whether or not, you know, you can just go straight to the end boss right at the very beginning of the game. So I was like, you know, I'm going to just go see what's going on over there. So as I was riding over there... Oh, and that's important to mention, too, is that I had just been in Kakariko Village and had learned about the captured memories in the Sheikah Slate. And so part of this exercise of going towards the castle was trying to figure out where the first one of these photos was actually taken at, so that I could start recalling the captured memories. And so I was trying to get up here, get a lay of the land, and see if I could get a similar angle to what the picture was showing in order to see if I could locate, you know, where that was. So I continued approaching towards the castle, and pretty soon I discovered how many guardians there were around it. You know, some of them were stationary, some of them were not stationary, like that one over there that can walk around. I was like, oh crap, this might not be good. And then they can see you from pretty far away, so I was trying to duck away and not take a hit from any of these guardians that were surrounding it. But now we haven't even approached 10 minutes yet in the video, and I've already had several interesting interactions, in my opinion, with the world. Whether this is something that you personally find interesting, I can understand if you say, like, I don't think this is fun. I think this is really boring. But for me, this approach to exploration, trying to understand the lay of the land, how do I get in there with all these guardians surrounding it? These are interesting, stimulating things for me to figure out. But I was going to see if I could go around and if there was going to be any area in which I could approach Hyrule Castle to where I wouldn't have this danger of running into all these guardians. I decided, well, let's go ahead and try this path right here. And then I saw these, you know, these sentinels that were flying around, and that was my first time seeing those. I was like, holy cow, what are those? You know, what kind of challenge is it going to be to approach one of those sentinels? How are they going to be able to attack me? Are they going to be as tough as the guardians are? Do I have any chance whatsoever of fighting them now? Like, all of these questions are coming into my mind as I'm exploring and just trying to sort of get my head wrapped around how to approach this castle. How am I going to get inside? All of this has happened at this point within 10 minutes of the beginning of my exploration. So here I am climbing some rocks, seeing if there's any way, and then, you know, a guardian sees me and sort of chases me off. And I saw it there that it was moving towards me, and I was like, oh crap, this is one of the mobile ones, not one of the stationary ones. So I started thinking maybe this isn't the best idea to do right now. This area is looking pretty dangerous at the moment, because I had, you know, at this point I would be one-shotted by any of those guardians. So I decided, you know what, instead I might go towards, you see that tower up there in the distance. So I was like, maybe I'll start heading over that way. And then I saw this tower over here on the left. I was like, okay, maybe I'll hit that one first on my way over to that other tower. That's sort of in the direction of where the main story mission is leading me anyways. So let me head out and do that instead. So I had decided I was going to try to approach the castle, gave that a shot, decided it wasn't something I want to do right now. Let me go try something else. This, to me, is engaging exploration. And I hope that you can understand from my perspective why it is that I feel that way. And this was just the beginning. This was just the first 10 minutes of the start of my exploration during this play session. This is where I decided I think I'm going to use the bank here to sort of dodge the attacks from the Guardian, but then there was obviously an Octorok, or whatever they're called, shooting me from that side, so I was trying to avoid being hit by him, while also trying to avoid being seen by the Guardian, and trying to see if there was a way that I'd be able to make my way over to these towers. I got to a place where I saw the bridge over here on the left. I saw this bridge over here on the left. I was like, okay, that's how I'm supposed to cross, but there's a Guardian there. And I was like, crap, I don't want to deal with that. So I was just going to see maybe if I'd be able to swim across instead. As it turns out, that didn't work out very well for me. I tried it. I knew I wasn't going to make it with my current stamina and the strength of the current. And the Guardian shot me while I was in the water anyway. So I was like, okay, that's definitely not going to work out for me. Why don't I try a different approach, a different method? So I went back that direction. The Guardian saw me, and I sort of spent a little bit of time here figuring out how to evade them. I came up with a pretty good method of being able to slowly but successfully maneuver my way around this Guardian without it killing me, and being able to get to that bridge. Which I was able to figure out, and I crossed the bridge without harm and made my way towards this tower over here. See, these to me are exciting and engaging interactions with the world. This is not to me representative of an empty landscape with nothing to do in it. So I've been going now for, around 15 minutes. And here's another, group of enemies that attack you during the nighttime. I'm making my way up here towards the tower. And in so doing, I came across another instance of some people getting attacked by bokoblins. So I ran over there to help them out. Again, I will admit that to certain people, this might not seem like it's very engaging, or it's repetitive, or, you've already done that interaction before. And I am totally willing to concede that for some people this is not interesting or enjoyable. But I also want to help you understand that the world isn't empty either. I don't think that we can call this an empty world. That there's nothing to do, that you're just going for stretches and stretches of time, doing nothing, but just making your way from point A to point B. I really just don't agree with that. And I think that, my experience here with all of what's going on, interacting with the NPCs and getting rewards, and then on my way to this tower, I discovered that there was an enemy encampment underneath it. There's going to be all of these enemies, and so I decided, am I going to want to fight these guys? Am I going to try and run past them? Having to keep account of the weapon durability, and are my weapons going to break before I can do this? I did some mining of some ores in the meantime while I was coming up here, and I discovered luminous ore, which was an ore that I had not found before, which is important for crafting the Guardian-type weapons, the light blue glowing type weapons. These are all things that, and there it is there, that rock is what I discovered. And these are all, to me, really interesting interactions. And then I was determined that I was going to climb this tower and figure out how to get up there. But I was really struggling to figure out how. There were all these enemies that were bombarding me, new types of enemies. There was one enemy back here a little bit, this guy here. And I was like, what the heck is that? I've never seen that before. They use mostly magic abilities. At the same time, Octoroks are shooting rocks at me. While I'm just trying to figure out how am I going to climb up this tower. Ultimately, I'm scoping out, trying to figure out where the enemies are at, trying to make a plan of attack, so to speak. Ultimately, I ended up dying at this part and deciding, I think I'll come back to this later. Because there's this enemy here in the water that can do, it's a Lizalfos, but like an electric Lizalfos. I believe he ended up killing me. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, let's go back to looking for the spot that I came here for in the first place. I was trying to find the place for that captured memory. That's what I really came here for. And so I was like, let's get back on track. I got distracted trying to do something else because I saw something else interesting in the environment that I wanted to go and explore. So I decided to go back around here again. Again, there are more enemies to find in the meantime. That killed me, obviously. So I decided to take a little bit more of a different path, a little bit higher, collecting new things along the way, figuring out how to combine the different ingredients for different effects for food. I found the Hinox, or Hinox, whatever it's pronounced as here. I was like, oh, this is from the reveal of the Switch, when they first did that first sort of little commercial for it, and the guy is walking his dog and he's outside and he's fighting a Hinox. So I was like, oh, interesting. Let's see if I can sneak up on this the same way that I do with other enemies and get a sneak attack on it and see if that can do a lot of damage. Or, you know, maybe I'll throw a bomb at it or whatever. I was thinking about different ways to approach it. I did very little damage. It woke up and started coming after me, and I was like, oh crap, I don't think I'll be able to fight this guy. Let me try shooting him in the eye. Did okay damage. Obviously would have been better with a stronger bow. But ultimately decided I'm probably not going to be able to take this one out. This is an enemy that's a little tough for me, but I did try shooting it and running up and attacking him. You know, now that I think about it, I probably could have taken this guy out, but I was probably just going to do it, you know, slowly, methodically. I wasn't going to try and, you know, rush it or anything like that. But I was keeping the camera oriented on him, and I did not pay attention to my surroundings, and I ended up, you know, falling down here into the river. And I was like, oh crap. But, like, in so doing, discovered a new kind of area down here. At first I was going to try and climb this thing, which I learned later you can do, but I figured that I'm probably not supposed to do that now. But within a couple minutes again, you know, there's guardians flying around. I went up to the top of here. I was trying to find the nearby shrine, and then I found the stone talus, and I was like, holy crap, another, like, big boss. You can throw rocks at you and stuff like that, and so I was trying to figure out how to kill this thing. I got up on its back, and I started attacking the pretty obvious big weak spot on the enemy. Kept going at it, and then eventually he shook me off here. And then he, you know, he had dropped a couple of really valuable ores, so I was like, oh, sweet. I'm gonna pick those up. And then as soon as I turned back around, I was gonna throw a bomb at him. He kills me in one hit. So, you know, like, I was like, okay, maybe I won't do that right now, but that's something I can come back and do later. I keep exploring, and within a few minutes, again, just within a couple minutes later, I found one of these Korok trials that are kind of scattered throughout the world, where you run up to the spot that they indicate, and then the Korok will give you a Korok seed. Kind of a new, different, interesting thing to do. That is a variance upon the other activities that I've been doing. In any case, you know, within the matter of an hour and a half of just trying to locate this one thing I was interested in, I actually encountered many, many other things along the way that were interesting to me, that pulled me in, that caused me to sort of deviate from the path I had intended to go on, and interact with the world in different ways. And this was all organic. Like, this all just happened unexpectedly. Here's another example, just, you know, a little while later, of me finding another Korok spirit. This time I was a little bit more concerned with going straight towards that tower and then figuring out where this this memory is at. Where there were a bunch of guardians in the way along the way. I had to really, you know, think about the path of how I was going to get there. You know, a couple of times I got shot by the guardians. I had to change my route, really figure out the best way to approach this tower. I ended up getting there, but they were trying to shoot me all the way up. And I eventually unlocked it, discovered where it was that I needed to go for this memory, made my way there, and saw the memory that I was looking for. So I set out to do that at around 16 minutes, right around here, right when we started. I didn't actually find what I was looking for until an hour later, because there was so much going on in the world that pulled my attention in other directions. And so, to me, the argument that the world is empty is one that does not resonate with me. To me, I find that there are lots of different things you can occupy your time doing. Even when you have a kind of a singular goal in mind. I'm going here to do this, but then you find this to do, you find that to do, you find that to do. And again, I will concede that whether or not you think any of these particular things that I ended up doing were interesting, it was extremely interesting to me. And it wasn't because it's a Zelda game, right? This kind of exploration was not, did not exist in older Zelda games. It was the fact that I was being attacked by this kind of enemy, trying to figure out how to deal with this challenge, trying to figure out where I should go in order to get up to here where I wanted to go. Like, I was engaged entirely with just figuring out the lay of the land, figuring out my strategy for how to approach it, and how to deal with the challenges that arose and blocked me on my way to doing those things. I found that all flows very naturally, and that there is a lot of it going on. And I just have never personally found myself running in one direction for any extended period of time and being bored, like, oh, geez, when am I going to get there? Let me pull up YouTube or do something on the side while I just continue running in this direction. I have never found that to be the case in my experience in playing this game. I feel like there's a lot to do. And again, if it's not your cup of tea, I am totally understanding of that. Absolutely fine. But I think that to indicate or to try and express that the game is a totally empty open world is also inaccurate. I will concede that the whole idea of the towers, climbing the towers to unlock the map, that being very derivative of Assassin's Creed, I didn't particularly enjoy that aspect of exploring the world by unlocking the map through activating towers. That to me wasn't, something I particularly enjoyed. But other interactions in the world I thought were a lot of fun. I like the climbing mechanic. I don't like the stamina mechanic so much. I think that the stamina gets a little bit in the way for me of really enjoying myself, especially if you don't upgrade it. When you first start the game and how little stamina you have, it can really get in the way. Which is why I focused primarily on upgrading stamina at the beginning of the game, so that I'd be able to climb and get to places I wanted to without the fear of falling and whatnot. I've also expressed in the past a little bit of frustration with the weather effects. I'm totally open to hearing your rebuttals to that. Some people have said they like the fact that it impedes gameplay. It makes you sort of like have to change the way you're dealing with things. There are other ways of dealing with those problems that I had not thought of before that people brought up. So I'm totally open to hearing your perspective on that. But there are some annoyances that came in exploring the world. But for the most part, I'd say for the vast majority of my time playing Breath of the Wild, I never felt bored in exploring the world. I felt that it was very, very open and full of things to do. So that's my perspective on that, and I am totally willing to hear any of your perspectives on that as well. Okay, let's talk about weapon durability real quick. This is something that I think is really just going to boil down to who you are. Let's start the discussion by saying I totally understand why the developers sort of had to do this. Their goal in the beginning was to create a world where you could go out and beat it in any order that you wanted to. There was going to be no linear structure to it. You could go fight the final boss if you wanted to right at the beginning of the game. You could do any of the divine beasts in whatever order you wanted. There was no specific order in which you had to do anything. And I can imagine that balancing an experience like that has to be really, really tough, because you want it to feel like a progression, like you're getting stronger as you go, and so the enemies need to get stronger as you grow. But if you can go to any location on the map whenever you want, for the most part, it makes it really tough to balance the game in that way. So one idea is to allow the player to get really powerful endgame weapons, depending on where they're going and that sort of thing. But then if you're able to keep that weapon long term and take it back to an area where the enemies are weaker and stuff like that, it would eliminate any of the challenge whatsoever. There would be no challenge. And so I can see the very fragile nature of the weapon durability being one answer to that problem. I still feel like that I personally would rather have a little more structure in terms of linear design that took away the weapon durability in its current state. That would just be my personal preference. But I can say for sure that it would be worse for me if we are going to have the open nature of the game be the way it is, to come across a late game weapon that I can use long term for the whole game that eliminates any challenge whatsoever. In some ways, I feel like the game already does that. If I could pull up my boss fight with Fireblight Ganon, I had some really strong weapons at this point because I had been doing a lot of exploration. I had saved a lot of these weapons for later. So when I fought this guy, the boss fight was just like pathetically easy. And it's because the weapon I was using was really powerful. So like I'm up there doing like, look at all this damage I'm doing on this guy. You know, within just a couple of hits, I've taken a huge chunk of his health there. You know, a few more hits here. It's like this boss was extremely easy for me, specifically because I was able to grab really high-level weapons from some really powerful enemies in some of the shrines that do like the tests of strength. I was able to get some guardian weapons from that made this particular boss fight a real piece of cake for me. And so, I mean, we are already seeing some of the costs of having a world as open as this, as a design philosophy. That's just something that is almost inevitable. But I can also see how the answer to that, to some degree, to keeping some level of challenge in the game for a game as open as this is, where you don't have to do it in any specific order, was weapon durability, you know, being the answer to that question. So I totally understand where the developers were coming from when they decided to make this decision. But I also understand that it is a very annoying thing to deal with for the player. And the level of annoyance for anyone in particular is, of course, going to depend on their own personal taste. I, for one, am able to get over weapon durability simply because you are always picking up new weapons anyways. I never found myself in a position where I was like, I have no weapons. There was only actually one example when that happened, but it was because I didn't have a weapon strong enough to fight this particular enemy. It was one of the Shrines of Major Strength. Where was it? Yeah, this video here. So at this point in the game, I didn't have any particularly strong weapons, but I kind of floated down to this island where the shrine was at. I was like, I'm gonna fight this guardian here, even though it was very tough, especially for, you know, the equipment that I had currently. I only had 3 hearts at this point. He could kill me in almost one hit, as you saw there. But I was trying to get down the timing for dodging and doing the flurries and stuff like that. But I ended up fighting this guy for 17 minutes and basically exhausting the durability on every single weapon that I had, down to where I had only a Korok leaf left, and I was trying to do damage to him. You see, he has a little bit of health left. I had no chance, really, of taking him out. But the problem was here that I could not defeat this enemy. Not because I wasn't skilled enough. I had figured out how to beat them at this point. After fighting it for 17 minutes, I knew all the patterns, I knew exactly what to do to avoid damage entirely. But I simply did not have the weapons that I needed in order to beat this thing, even though I had the skill. So that was actually a similar problem that I had with The Witcher 3. There were certain enemies you come across where it's like, I could avoid damage entirely. I know exactly how to fight this thing, but I can't beat it because my weapons are going to degrade and break before I have a chance of beating it. And if I don't have enough repair toolkits and things like that, then it's just hopeless. I can't beat this thing. So it's not testing your skill so much as it is requiring you to level up a certain amount to be able to defeat that challenge. And there's a little bit of that exists here in this game too. And that in particular bothers me a little bit. I'd rather have the game test my skill, but that is, you know, a thing of personal taste. But The Witcher is not as open as this game is. It closes off certain areas that you cannot proceed there until you have a certain level requirement or whatever. And here, you're just allowed to go wherever you want. So that was their goal. That was what they set out to do. That's what they wanted. They wanted a game where you could just go out, do whatever you want in whatever order you want. And the answer to the problem that arose from that game design choice, which is, what if they get late game weapons and come back and certain things are just way too easy? Their answer for that was weapon durability. And I understand that, even if it bothers me a little bit, and that's why I'm able to forgive it, and just play according to the design they had set up. Just use weapons as I get them, pick up more as I get them, and not worry about saving weapons or anything like that. And I ended up really having a good time with the game once I sort of played with that mindset, rather than the mindset that I would traditionally have maybe in playing a game like this. So if that makes sense, my qualms with weapon durability have been lessened to kind of a major degree because of that. There are some people that I've talked to as well who have said they didn't like the fact that the game gives you all of your powers, all of your Sheikah Slate abilities right at the beginning of the game, and then just kind of let you loose on the world to use those as you go. And the argument from that side is that there's nothing to look forward to in terms of like discovering a new way, a new tool for approaching different challenges. Like, he knew that he already had everything at his disposal right now, and so a large part of his motivation for exploration of the world was lessened because he knew there wasn't anything else he was going to discover in terms of new abilities. And I totally understand that. I think that's absolutely a legitimate criticism of the game and a way to feel. But again, I think it kind of comes down to what the designer's sort of intention was with this, which was to let you go wherever you want and beat it in whatever order you want. And in order to do that, I think, again, the plateau, the Great Plateau sort of tutorial area where they give you all of those Sheikah abilities was the answer to that. It's like that's really the only way that they were going to be able to have a totally open world game like they wanted to have, where you could go out and do it in whatever order you wanted. The only way to do that is to give you the tools to do that right at the very beginning. And so, again, I understand from the developer's point of view, and I also understand from players' point of view who don't really find that very exciting, or who get fatigued by repeating sort of the same sorts of challenges, using the powers over and over again in every shrine and in every divine beast without any expectation for finding a new thing, a new way to be able to interact with dungeons and puzzles. So that's really just going to come down to personal preference again. For me, I really appreciated what they were trying to do here in Breath of the Wild, and I had a lot of fun with it personally. And I can see why reviewers of the game were praising it the way they were, even if I don't agree with them when it comes down to like story and some other things that for me pulls the experience down a little bit. I can see how people could play this game and just have immense amounts of fun with it. If any of you have seen the video game Donkey video that he produced on this game, you know, people like that who just love to experiment with the way they can interact with things, who can find out creative ways to use the tools they have to do crazy stuff. This game is especially amazing for people who approach games like that. You know, the stuff he was kind of coming up with, like the creative ways for killing enemies, that is a lot of fun for people who think that way. And that was actually an intentional design choice. That was something that the developers of Zelda, if you've watched any of their recent behind-the-scenes videos that they kind of put up on YouTube, that was something that they were looking to do. They wanted players to approach the game and experiment in that way. They wanted the player to have a feeling, I think the way they phrased it was, I'm a genius. They wanted the player to feel like they were a genius in figuring out this totally crazy, unique way of interacting or traveling or doing whatever. And if that's something you're into, Breath of the Wild has so much to offer for you. And it can, I think this idea of certain people feeling like the world is empty versus other people feeling like it has tons to offer, a lot of that comes down to whether or not you want the game to offer you, distinctly unique interactions constantly for 40 or 50 hours or whatever, or whether or not you're the kind of person who wants to approach your current tool set and find creative ways of using that to interact with the world and share that with your friends and stuff like that. So again, I think so much of that is subjective, of course, but I really do feel like Breath of the Wild's gameplay is a lot of fun overall. I had a ton of fun with it, and I really don't agree with these accusations that it's a totally empty world or anything like that. Okay, one more thing I want to talk about before wrapping up here is the final boss. So like I said, some of those bosses, some of the Water Blight Ganon boss I found was a really interesting fight. It was tough for me to kind of figure it out. I died a couple times on that one. The Fire Blight one was easy because I went and got really powerful weapons and then came in, and it was very easy for me to figure out. The one that was, I think, the most interesting for me was the Thunder Blight Ganon boss fight, where trying to figure out the timing on fighting that thing was really, really tough. You know, he'd kind of zoom in at you. Let's see if we can see it here. Like, he'll do this move where he kind of like, bam, and just attacks you like that. I'm like, whoa, you know, trying to figure out how to deal with that and parry with the correct timing. And, you know, he'd keep attacking me like that. Like, this was a boss fight that challenged me a lot, which was a big step up from the Fireblight Ganon boss fight, which, as you saw, didn't challenge me at all. But then with the Windblight one, I found again that it was really extremely easy, and it's hard to say whether or not it's just an easy boss fight, whether or not it's just not as well designed as the others, or whether it had to do with my personal experience, the way I approached the game, the way I explored it, and you know, the equipment that I had going in. There's just so many factors that can kind of go into whether or not you end up struggling against these bosses, whether they end up being interesting or challenging to you or not. But in particular, I'd say Thunderblight Ganon and Waterblight Ganon were interesting and challenging boss fights. And the Fireblight Ganon, as well as Windblight Ganon, were not so much. They were a little bit easier, in my opinion. But the final boss fight, while I thought this phase here was pretty interesting, like trying to figure out how exactly I'm supposed to hit him when he's in his invincible form here towards the end when his health is low. You know, I was using, I forget the name of this power, I don't know if you can see my mouse, the one on the bottom, the one that comes from Urbosa, which is kind of like a lightning attack. It was like, while I was waiting for that lightning attack to come back so that I could get him out of this, you know, invincibility form, I was trying to find out how exactly am I supposed to attack and do damage. And so, like, I found some challenge there for sure. Eventually found out that with a successful dodge or a successful parry, that, you know, it'll open up an opportunity to attack him again. So while that I found was a pretty interesting, I think here. No, I waited for the power to come back and I did it. Anyways, there were a couple of times where I did end up with a successful parry. But I found that part of the boss fight really easy, but this part, or not really easy, it was interesting enough, but this part of the boss fight, man, this was a real disappointment for me. This humongous Dark Beast Ganon, which from a design standpoint looks really cool, but it mostly just kind of stands there and lets you run around it. I mean, what's he attacking here? You know what I mean? Like, he's just shooting a laser out that way, and I'm able to just kind of ride around at will and shoot these different parts of it. I found that this particular part, the design of this part of the boss fight was a little bit ridiculously easy. And I was real disappointed with this specific, you know, phase of the boss fight. It looks really cool. You know, it's huge, it fills the screen, but it was not particularly dangerous. It was very easy to avoid its attacks. It moved incredibly slowly. Like, there didn't seem to be, like, any sort of variance to its attacks that would account for the position of the player. If the player's behind Beast Ganon, will he like do a kick with his back foot? If the player's underneath Beast Ganon, will he just like, you know, drop down on his stomach and crush you? You know, it seemed its only attacks were to turn around towards you and try to laser fire you from the mouth. So, I don't know. I found this particular phase of the boss to be really easy and kind of disappointing. But, would like to know what your experiences were with that as well. But overall, I found that the combat was interesting. It's definitely not challenging on the same level as something like Dark Souls, which is, I think, fine. I think it's perfect for the series. But it was definitely more challenging. You would die easier. You had to pay more attention to timing with parrying and dodging and that sort of thing, which I think added enough challenge to the game to take it a step up from what previous Zelda games had been doing. Where, you know, after playing Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and Wind Waker, when I would play Twilight Princess, it was like, there is absolutely not one time in my entire playthrough of that game ever, even on hero mode or anything, where I felt in danger of being killed. And a lot of that came on a reliance of mechanics that had sort of stayed with the series since Ocarina of Time, which had, I think, become a little bit outdated by the time we got to Twilight Princess, that is. And so I love how radically different combat feels, and how much more difficult it really is. They really upped the ante there for Breath of the Wild. And so I had a lot of fun overall with the gameplay, the open world, the battle mechanics, and with you know, most of the boss fights. There's one boss fight I found really fun, which was this one here. If you haven't done this yet, again, I've already warned about spoilers, but this particular boss fight in the Yiga hideout against Master Koga, is that his name? Yeah. This was a really fun fight, really funny. It incorporated the use of the Sheikah Slate abilities in really interesting ways. Just a really interesting, unique boss fight. Boss fights like this, as well as, like I said, Thunderblight Ganon and Waterblight Ganon, kind of made up for me for the... Well, I won't say made up. It was still really disappointing that Dark Beast Ganon was as simple and easy as it was. But there were other very interesting boss fights that I liked a lot. And so overall, my overall experience with the gameplay of Breath of the Wild was very positive. I had a lot of fun playing the game. And but I would like to hear from people who disagree with my point of view on the open world structure of the game, combat, weapon durability, that sort of thing. I'd like to hear from you and see you know, why it is that you disagree with me, and take that into account, get a little bit more of a universal view for how other players are feeling about these things, so that I can account for that in the eventual review that I'm going to make. Okay, so that's going to wrap us up for the first video discussion. On the next video discussion, I'll be talking about the story, and I have a lot to talk about there. That was the most disappointing part of the game for me, so I look forward to getting your perspective on that as well. Until then, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again really soon.